I want someone who loves me. Is it connected? Did it connect?
Okay.
Did you
Do you want
connect?
my video on?
It's totally up to you.
Oh,
It is
I look a
totally
little
up to
weird
you.
right now, but we'll do it.
It's
My lighting in
totally,
my room is iffy,
it's
but
totally up to you. Hi, Lily. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am good. I'm making sure I have your consent form here. And then I don't have, nope, I have it right there. There it is. Okay. All right. So the show runs an hour. I'll start in like 5 minutes. I'm glad. Thank you for coming a little early. Um, let's see how the show breakdown. So it's pretty much like kind of what you do on TikTok. I will kind of ask a couple questions if you're telling your story that doesn't make sense to me or the listeners. Halfway through the show, I will try to find a place that's like good for a break, and I'll just say, "All right, well, we're gonna take a break, and we'll learn more about Lee when we get back." And then the last thing is right after you've finished telling your story, I will ask you a question. Just pretty much like, is there one thing that you would tell a current foster youth if there was like a piece of advice you could give them? And I ask that to every guest. And other than that, yeah, it's pretty free flowing show, and it's your show. This is the time for you to share your story and to have your voice. So I don't make
I'm so
pretty many. I don't make
excited.
much rules.
I shared this all over my personal Facebook and stuff in some communities. I was like, this is my favorite Black content creator. You have to listen in. You need to buy this book. You need to hear this person. So we should have some more people come into your podcast because they were pretty excited about you.
That's exciting. Thank you for sharing. 1 second. Grayson, get down. Let me close my office door. There's going to be a noise, y'all. I'm closing the door. I'm closing the door on you. Okay, there we go. Now I have silence. Make sure my mic is good. This is good. All right, so I'll just do a quick countdown and then we will start recording officially. 5. Oh, wait, you want to go by Lily, correct?
Yes, please.
Okay, that was the last thing. Your pronouns?
She, her.
She, her. Okay. And 5, 4, 3. Welcome back to another episode of Wards of the State. And today I have a ward. No, I have a TikToker, a little TikToker. She's amazing. She's an advocate. She does like so many fundraisers and drives. And every time I see her on TikTok, she's doing something for foster youth in her community. She inspires me to just like keep up this work because sometimes it'd be hard. It'd be real rough, especially when a lot of people are talking bad about you or asking you ridiculous questions. And every time I see her videos on TikTok, I'm just like, she somehow just finds a way to smile and answer their rude questions with a little bit of sass, but a lot of education. So I want to introduce y'all to Lily. Hey, Lily, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My pleasure. So, yeah, this is Word of the State. Kind of just jump right into it. You were in foster care, correct?
Yeah, so I was in foster care from the ages of 9 to 18 in the state of Pennsylvania. I understand my experience might be a little different than others, and I think that's why my message and my voice is so strong to obviously also advocate for biological families at the same time. Um, so maybe I'll just start by explaining like how that story started, how I ended up there.
Yeah, start
Um,
off like how did you get introduced to the state, or even if you want to share like your life before the state.
So before I entered foster care, I lived pretty often with my mother in Florida. I remember Florida as being this bright, beautiful, sunny place. I thought it was the most wonderful place in the world. My mother occasionally did struggle with addiction, but it's nothing I ever saw, because when my mother would come across those problems, she would send me to a safe place, which would be my grandmother's in Pennsylvania. So I don't have any trauma or ill thoughts around those moments, because she said, or she would just do the right thing and send me to my grandmother's. I have an older sister named Ariana. We were pretty close and also rivalries. We're totally different from each other. Living at my grandmother's was like a dream. Even when I think back to it now, my grandmother lived in the woods in Pennsylvania. I could run around and climb in the trees and have imagination. My grandmother understood my ADHD and she accommodated me. She never made me feel any different. When I had trouble falling asleep, and I needed stimulation to fall asleep, she would sit there and she would pat my back and rub me until I fell asleep. She loved me quite a bit. My dad really wasn't in the picture at that point. But my grandmother was really the main person that I had the biggest connection with. She had been there at my birth. She'd been there for every moment of my life. She's a very supportive person who would help anyone in our family that was in need. Um, I love her very much. She was so kind and caring. We had big family Thanksgivings and dinners, and we always had friends over because my grandpa went to AA like since I was born. And sometimes I would go to those meetings and be having donuts and
Not
coffees
grandpa in
too.
AA for a lifetime, but hey, listen, it's a marathon, not a race.
Oh my gosh, it was like their community almost. They would come over and
That's
some of the people
hilarious.
would have coffee or we'd sit by a fire. I got stuck in a tree once. I climbed up too high and they had to call the fire department because I was scared to climb down. But overall, my life was generally an average, happy childhood. I had everything I needed. I did not know that I was in lower income, because I never really thought to compare myself to anybody else. I never thought that there was anything wrong with my family. I was okay. I was fine. So one day, the school had noticed that my clothing was starting to get a little tighter, a little shorter. Mind you, my grandmother was not getting benefits because she did not want to ever take custody from my mother. So she always kept open communication and she was providing for me, my sister, and her two children that were in high school. She was a CNA at a nursing home. She was doing her best to keep up. So originally, the school reached out to CPS, and CPS, or Children and Youth Services, whatever it's called, it varies per state. They originally said that they were going to offer clothing help, that there was some kind of funding or resources for clothing, and that was kind of it. My grandma didn't hear back. Um, One day, two people, two caseworkers with badges, showed up to my grandmother's house and kind of came inside. And I can't really remember the conversation they were having with my grandmother, but they pulled me out of the conversation to another room. And this is kind of where my story really started to collect and begin. So, in that room with that caseworker at 9 years old, I was coerced into entering foster care. That's where my story might be a little different than others. There was no neglect or abuse in my family at all.
And by
There was no
coerce, like, what do you mean by coerced?
So this caseworker specifically started talking down about my low income family and starting to explain to me that they could offer me brand new clothes, all these things these other kids have. I could live in a nicer house. They were belittling my family. If you stay here, you'll end up just like them. You don't want to become like an addict like your mom. You don't want to have to drop out of school because that's what your life will be like if you stay here.
I kind of
And
feel
I
like when I got put into foster care, that expectation kind of was put on me too. They're like, "Well, look, you have a place and it's safe and you have clothes and all of this." And it was just like they show you all these shiny things and you're like, "Okay, well maybe being in place is not as bad because at home it was worse." But then when you actually see it's like, "Oh, it ain't worse." Like being here in
yeah.
foster care is way worse.
Absolutely. And at 9, I don't think that I was old enough to consent to something like that. And I didn't actually consent, is what I'm going to say. I actually was just staring at this lady, not sure that I was allowed to say no. When there is an adult authority in front of you as a small child who's never dealt with authority, you don't know that you can say no, I want to stay here. You feel like you're almost being told that this is what's going to happen. So that day they removed me. um that was one of the most traumatic days to start, because being put in the back of a car and locked inside while you're watching your grandmother screaming and reaching for you don't understand what's happening. It feels like you're being kidnapped. It's very, very traumatic. You're trying to get out of this car, the door is locked, you have no idea where you're going, you have no idea what's happening. um, the CPS worker never explained what was really going on. And they took me immediately to a foster home that was temporary. The first foster home that I was at was a temporary one, so they only took kids up to 2 weeks. It was more like a respite type place. They were nice, but everything was different, and that's part of trauma. The house smelled different, the food was different, everything was so different. Like the smells in the house, I actually got nauseous. Not because it smelled bad, but to me it smelled way different. It was just very overwhelming, all of my sensories. This is not my bed. The sheets were different. I was freaked out using someone else's blanket. Nobody at this point had still ever told me what was going to happen. And from there, they moved me into my first actual foster home. That foster home was overfilled with children and ran a daycare, and the older foster kids would run the daycare as well. This is where I first came in contact with food restriction. I'd never had to experience that. Even as low income or poverty, I was allowed to eat whenever I wanted to eat. It was never like a thing. But at this house, she would literally measure a cup, like measured portions of food. And I was so hungry because I was used to being able to eat whenever I wanted. Locks on the fridge, beepers on your doors if they opened. And I remember that was one of my first videos that caught your attention, I think. I would sneak out and ball
Yes,
up a
the
piece of
food
bread.
video. The food video was crazy.
Yeah, I would sneak out and ball a piece of bread up and like stick it in my cheek and like suck on it because I was so hungry and I had to sneak. I mean, I had to I was deathly afraid. And it's not right that as a child I had to be afraid to walk across the house to get a piece of bread. But I was deathly
Woo!
afraid.
Girl, I can't take it. I thought I could take it today, Lily.
Yeah, it was when you're in the middle of trauma, one thing I want to say is at the time everything was moving so quickly. I almost didn't have really much time to really process how much it hurt. That came way later on. Not that it didn't hurt, but that just everything was going so quickly that I was just trying to survive. Like I didn't know what was going on. I got kicked out of that foster home pretty quickly, and thrown into a psych ward. And that is where my cycle began. In total, and I'll get to one of two specific foster homes I want to touch upon, but in total, I was in 56 foster homes. I was in 3 group homes and 2 shelter stays. I don't know how many respite cares because almost every holiday I spent in respite with people. Um, so after that psych ward stay, they threw me to a group home. This group home, I don't think I should have been there. It was very high end restrictive, asked to come in and out of doors. You had to wear a uniform. I had to share a room with bunk beds with like 20 other girls in it. It was super, super strange. It was also a culture shock because I came from the country and this was in the middle of a city. Like I had no idea how to relate to the people I was in this group home with because I had never experienced being in a city. Like I didn't know some of what they were talking about, and I was trying to fit in,
Exactly.
and
Got you. No,
it was yeah, it was super strange. Along the road of going from there, a caseworker was supposed to quit her job to take me or something, and then apparently she read my background file or something and realized that she knew who my grandparents were and could not take me. So a really nice family did take me. Um, I had two sisters there. They had a lot of animals. They not in the bad way. Like most of them were outside. Like they
Yeah,
had
that was like my
goats.
thing. I was like a lot of animals like in the house.
Like there were bunnies outside and chickens in the coop outside. There were horses. There was now the goats scared me. There was goats. I was not a fan of them because they looked at me funny and I thought they were going to eat me alive. But this foster mother, when she first picked me up, she took me to a store and bought me hygiene products. And from the day that I left until that point was the first time somebody had bought me my own hygiene products that I was allowed to pick. And even by that point, it was almost like novel that someone was treating me like a human being. Um, she was really awesome. She would paint my nails while I was sleeping. She was an artist, so she would paint my nails in these crazy elaborate designs. You'd wake up with like waterfalls on your nails. Um, she was very healing, understanding. I was removed from there because
So
this
why?
is
Because this
well,
sounds like a
she
good placement.
yes, it was a really great placement. So one of the children in the home had been adopted. She had been adopted through Children and Youth Services. It was a need for a home. I do think in this case it was a good fit. This child has a lot of like her parts of her brain were too small, her cleft palate was real high. A lot of foster parents didn't want her, but Dee Dee was quick to like take this baby and love her. She still has her. So she adopted her. The caseworker before adoption was obsessed with this child, obsessed. So even after the adoption, she would stop over at Dee Dee's house and would literally like check on this adopted child years later. Mind you, I'm still a child myself. And one day this woman came over to see the child, and I'd been mad. At that moment, there was, this little girl was coming in my room and ripping up my stuff, and I did nothing that was abnormal. I yelled. Like, stay out of my room. And she went and ran and told Children and Youth Services, that previous worker, that I was violent and I was a risk to that younger
And
child.
that stays on your record forever.
Ever. Yeah, after that, I was looked at much differently. The foster mom did want to keep me, but the county was like, no way. Then we'd have to question your parenting of the safety of this child that you adopted. And so they removed me. That was really difficult because that was the first good foster home I came across. The first place where I could listen to music in my room. I could go to, I was starting to settle into a school. I actually met my best friend there. We're still best friends. This girl, and I have her permission to say her name. I let her know I was doing this today, but Josette is a tenacious woman. She was on like the varsity wrestling team in like 7th grade. Oh, sorry.
I was like, what
I'm
happened?
sorry. Oh my gosh. I don't know what my mom tried to call me. I had to hang up a second. I am
No,
so
do you want to
sorry.
answer a phone call?
No, she can wait.
Okay.
But it was normal. I was starting to relax back into normalcy. And when they ripped me up and took me away, this is where my very first bad experience of foster homes is. So it is on my TikTok page. There is a physical photo of the house that they took me to. I don't understand how they took me here. This caseworker drove me, and mind you, when they're moving you around, I'm not being told where I'm going. They're calling, seeing who's available. That's where you're going. Hey, this is where you're living. See you later.
I had one person ask me on TikTok, I think it was yesterday or today, and they're like, why are, because I made a video about my 30 placements. And a lot of people, maybe you can answer this, Lily, like why, well, maybe you did just kind of answer. There's different reasons. Like this little girl, and like, yeah, this little girl, you screamed at this little girl, and now all of a sudden you're a risk and you have to be moved. There's simple things like that. that can make you go to another placement. So like when people ask on TikTok, well, why were you so in so many placements? They automatically think it was the behavior of the foster child or it was something that the foster child did when a lot of the times it's not, you know?
Yeah, a lot of foster parents as well, before I travel down that road, I want to add to that, have like a savior godlike complex. They believe that they're going to get this child and this child is just going to attach and they're going to be so thankful and they're going to love them so much. And they don't even think about the trauma or their biological connection still or any of that. And when that child is not connecting with that foster parent the way that they want to demand them to, they tend to say that, we're acting out, we're defiant, we have reactive attachment disorder, whatever they say about us, because we're not doing what they want. And the behaviors that we're displaying are actually perfectly normal given the situation. So they dropped me off as this dirty, dilapidated front porch is
Not
falling in.
dilapidated, not dilapidated.
Oh, for sure. The front porch, I was scared to walk on it. It looked like it was going to fall in. I walked into this tiny house. The caseworker didn't even come in. I was their first ever foster child, ever. And it's this couple with no other children. My bedroom is right off the kitchen. It's also the laundry room. The bathroom
Wait,
is also
wait.
technically, yeah.
I'm sorry to laugh.
No, it's
Did
okay.
you just say, why did you just fly past it like that? Did you just say your bedroom was also the laundry room?
Yeah. You're going to die of laughter in a second. The bathroom was also in my room. There was no door on the bathroom. Like there was a wall separating me and the toilet essentially because there was no door on the bathroom. So like my room has this little spot in it where there's a bathroom. There's a
Who
literal
approved this?
door.
Who did that home study?
I don't know. Maybe nobody. Possibly nobody. They might have been so desperate, and that does happen. Sometimes they just fly by or fly through. I think in this case, because the foster fathers, his own father was a foster parent, that they just assumed it would be all right. Mind you, yeah, it was so it was very awkward there. The foster mother got mad because I wouldn't call her mother and like punched out a window. She took away my ADHD medication, started abusing it. She, oh my gosh, it was crazy. The animals in the house would urinate and defecate on my mattress and they wouldn't clean it. They would just flip the mattress over, spray some Lysol on top and flip it. I was not comfortable. I kept calling my caseworker like, you need to get me out of here. Like at this point, I'm not sure why you thought this was better than my grandma's house, but nobody peed on my bed there. Like this is getting to be serious. So while I was there, they would drop me off a lot at the foster father's father. So my foster grandfather, we'll say that. At first, I thought he was a really nice guy because he let me ride on four-wheelers, and that was against the county's like policy. I'm like, this guy's breaking the rules. All right. He had foster children in his care and his own grandsons. And when I hung out there, it was always a bunch of boys. And like all these boys were accepting, like jumping on the trampoline, but his grandsons were super protective of me and wouldn't let me in the house the first like 5 times I went there. And mind you, they dropped me off at this house all of the time. And this man is also a school woodshop teacher at a high school. Mm-hmm. I eventually did get to come inside, and I walked in one day to my foster grandfather taking photos of the boys undressed. I walked in at a separate time of him essaying one of his grandsons. I didn't know what to think when I saw the essay.
This is the foster grandfather.
Yes, this is a foster parent himself, and it's my foster dad's
Parent's
dad.
dad.
Yes, and he's a
Okay.
teacher at a high school.
So he has his fostering license too. So he just has
Yes.
kids in his care that he's doing this
Yes.
too. And then he ran out of kids of his care, so he just went in and picked some up from his son's care.
Yep, he got, and there were neighborhood boys, and who knows the extent of how much was going on. But
And
when I
you
first
know what's crazy? People have read my book and they're just like, "How did you get assaulted that many times?" Because there are weirdos and pedophiles who do this shit.
absolutely, and if you do, and when you are like assaulted in that way and you're not believed, it makes it more vulnerable for you to be re-victimized again, because you will not believe that anyone will hear you, care, or listen. Sometimes victims of SA are often interrogated more than the criminal, even in the procedures legally. So I like ran out of the house, and I think what always strikes me and hurts me is the boy that had been assaulted, that was his grandson. When it was all said and done and he came outside, like, he was really protective of me. He looked at me and he's like, "You're never to go in that house again. Whatever you saw, you didn't see, but I'm okay. And, we'll we'll just make sure that you never go inside. You don't need to see that." So I stayed outside, but now that I saw that, I was able to start picking up on how distressed he was. This was a lot of abuse going on. Now, mind you, I reported this to my caseworker, who absolutely never returned my phone call. I then called my guardian ad litem, who never returned my phone call. And this went on and it went on. I was in that foster home and around that foster grandfather for only 3 months, because my neighbors called children and youth services on my foster parents, because I would be
That's a
left out.
damn shame.
Yes, they were like calling, like, "This girl is dirty, doesn't have clothes, doesn't, like, she's getting locked outside, they're not home, I don't know where they are." I had to bring her to my house and feed her because they were gone for hours. um so children and youth then moved me from there to another foster home on the other side of my state, like not even in the same county now. They moved me to a place in Emporium, Pennsylvania. This is the first time that I was directly in a foster home with uh, a male foster child. So this home on the outside seemed nice. They got the pool out front. It might be a double wide trailer, but it's nice inside. It's not bad. There's no, what's that TikTok sound? This is nice. There's no
This is not
cockroaches.
right. This is nice. Look at you.
Yeah. So at first, even though I'm weary, because you had up until this point, I've already been traumatized. I've seen things. I've been mistreated. I've been food restricted. I've been degraded. When I got there, I was having a little hard time settling in. The foster mother would pinch my back um, to measure my back fat, and then wouldn't let me drink milk. She was also into the food restriction. She wanted a foster daughter so bad to dress me up. And I am what do they call that? Sometimes I'm masculine and sometimes I'm very feminine, but I did not
They
want to
call that
be.
human. They call that human.
I'm a human. So
You said, what do they call that? They call that human.
I am not the level of feminine that she was trying to put on me. She wanted me to be like some kind of pageant girl. And I'm like, girl, I don't wear dresses. This is just not what I'm into. So I get on the swim team. The foster father was always drinking. He would call me like hot pants. I took that as some kind of like sexual like slur. Like I don't know, it seemed very rude, whatever it meant, but it would make me angry, and then I would tell him to shut up. And see, the thing is, they never told my caseworker that I was being defiant at that point, because they knew that what was being said to me was wrong. So they're telling children and youth everything's fine, and I'm over here like mouthing off to this drunk guy. His wife is trying to be like, "Oh no, it's okay, it's okay, here honey, go to your room, it's fine." um I got my first ever boyfriend, the kind where like the hair on your arm stand up because your toes touched each other in class. Like, we had not even kissed or anything. This was just a really nice boy. I was excited to hang out with him. The boy that was in the foster home with me was actually from my original county as well. With and he was kind of the cool kid, typical white boy playing football with his pearly white teeth, making everyone think he's a nice guy,
Yep.
acting like he's a ladies' man, too much ego, drinking, all that. Like, just he was not a nice guy. Um, But I thought at the time that he was cool, whatever that means now. But at the time, I was like, everybody likes this guy. Like, I feel so awkward. And we never really had many talks together or anything. And then out of nowhere, um, he asked me to start sneaking cigarettes from my foster parents. And he made it seem like he was like, oh, cool. Like, you're my sister. Like, and I was like, oh my God, I finally, sure. Yeah. Like, I have a connection with someone that's also a
Yep.
foster youth. All right,
Yep.
I'll do this for you. Um, After that, weird stuff. And mind you, the foster parents' bedroom was all the way on one side, and our bedrooms were all the way on the other side. And there was an adjoining bathroom between our rooms, so he could come into the bathroom, then come into my room. Same,
This is
back and
not this
forth.
is this is the same house that had the door that was in the bathroom that was in your room?
No,
Okay.
this is where they moved.
Wait.
No, no, this one had a
No.
door, and the laundry room was completely separate this time.
Oh
Um,
goodness. I gotta make this lighthearted a little bit. A
yeah,
little bit.
yeah, this is where they moved me to next. And at the time, like, they took me to New Jersey, to like Six Flags. They bought me brand new clothing. I'm starting to feel like, okay, my foster brother then at the time started, nobody's had any talks with me at this point, my foster brother started pulling my pants down in front of his friends, and I would get embarrassed. I'm a young girl, I'm only 13 at this point, and I, like, my face would turn red, embarrassment, like ashamed that I was being exposed. And he would laugh at me, and like, when I'd run away to cry, they'd grab a hold of me and pull me back, and they'd be laughing, and they'd be like, "Is it just a joke? We're just joking with you." And it felt really in- invasive, but I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know what that was. That kind of behavior continued for a little while, and then um, one night he knew the medications I was taking, as in they over medicated me while I was in foster care.
And at
So
this time, you're 13 while
I'm
he's
13.
showing you in front of his friends, over medicating you, like
Yes,
pulling down your pants, like, and you've already reported this, correct?
not this part, not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet. Um, I didn't, and the reason I didn't report the pulling down the pants and stuff was because his friends were at my school. He was the cool kid. I had new clothes. I was trying to make this work because the caseworker, before she brought me to this house, was like, "You got to make this work." So here I am thinking, okay, I have to make this work. Um, I'm starting to feel like a burden. They're starting to make me feel like I'm a problem. So they had me on a high dose of trazodone, which I'm assuming my foster brother tested out a few times before he did what he did. But uh, I was sleeping one night, and I felt a hand come down my waistband and my pants, and
Mm-mm.
I was awake. Like, I was awake. The trazodone makes it heavy. It makes it hard to, like, physically sit up. You're mentally awake, but you're very groggy. And let's not forget that I was scared to death. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand my body or what was going on.
Mm.
And he molested me for a little while, and I just laid there, stiff as a board. I didn't know what to do. And when he left the room, I was in shock. I was in there, just how I sound now. I could not comprehend that this was happening to me. That continued to happen for a few days. Um, when he would try to molest me, I would try to pretend to roll over in my sleep, and I thought maybe that would, like, get him off of me. That did not dissuade him in any way. This happened in a very aggressive and rough manner, so that I have scarring on the inside of my private areas now, from this and the things that happened during that molestation. So a few days after this was all happening, I went and I told my little high school boyfriend, who was really a great guy, and he told his parents, and his parents came to me, and they were like, If you don't feel comfortable telling someone, I will, but we have to. Like, I can't sit here knowing this because I had told my boyfriend. Imagine he's also 13. So
Wow.
he was probably very in shock as to what to do. So here's where everything explodes. Here is where one of the most biggest injustices of my entire time in foster care was. And by 13, I mean I had just turned 13 before I got there. And before I got there, I mean in total from start to end, I was only in this foster home for 4 months. So I I get pulled from school by my foster mother because this my boyfriend's dad had called children and youth. My foster mother comes and picks me up and takes me home. She does not bring my foster brother home. You know what I mean? She's smart enough not to do that. But she takes me home and she's questioning me while her husband wasn't there, and she's crying. And moment, for one moment, I thought someone believed me. Um, I thought that she was on my side. I thought she heard me. I thought for a moment that I was safe. I thought that, maybe they'd kick him out of the home. And even though this foster father was a drunk, it was better than some other things. I could have handled it if I needed to. And I shouldn't have had to feel any way like I had to handle any of it, but it was better than something else. So when the caseworker gets there, and for context, the caseworker that I had was also this foster boy's caseworker.
Mm.
We had the same worker. So she shows up. I barely get a few words out of my
No, you're fine.
I barely get a few words out of my mouth, and she started screaming at me like, I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know why you would make up these lies. So and so would never do this. I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him. We're going to see what he says because I do not believe you. Meanwhile, I'm hurting because I have injuries now down there. I'm trying to explain to them I'm feeling pressure in my private areas. I'm in pain. It's uncomfortable. It's burning. I'm hurting. During the time that it took my caseworker to get to my foster home, my foster mother could have taken me to the hospital, could have contacted state police. She did nothing. When the CPS worker got there, she could have done both of those things. What she did instead was bring home my abuser, sit him in front of me while he was
Mm.
smirking, and said, "Did you molest her?" And he said no. He said no.
Lied right in her face.
No. Like, what did you expect him to say? And I'm just sitting there waiting for this foster mother who acted like she believed me to say something, somebody to do something. Um, I'm telling the truth. Like, this is real and it's happening to me. Why won't anybody hear me? Instead, what happened was she gave me a garbage bag and told me to gather what I could as quickly as I could, and like put me in a car, drove me 2 hours back to the agency, the whole time berating me, belittling me. We can tell you came from your family of hillbillies because you're nothing but a liar and a problem causer. From the day that we've gotten you, all we've had is complaints. Nowhere's good enough for you. Um, I mean, just breaking me down the whole car ride to where I think that was the first time in my life I really disassociated. I was just looking out the window and I was trying to be anywhere but in that
Right
car.
there. Yeah, Lily, I definitely have. If you've read my book, you know that I dissociate a lot too when I'm in a space where I just mentally can't do it anymore, and I just go to my safe place. Um, I want to take it. We're gonna go take a real quick break, but when we come back, I want to hear the rest of how you survived this experience because it just seems like no one was listening to you and everything was your fault, even though you were the victim in all of this. And
Absolutely.
this is something that happens in foster care a lot. And this is why we have this podcast because each story matters and each story is not a monolith. And each story, some, I just, you're like my sixth or seventh interview this week. And every story has been so different. But yours, I knew it. That's why I put yours on a Wednesday because usually we record Tuesdays and Thursdays. But I knew that yours was heavy, so I was like, let me put Lily's separately because I'm gonna
Yeah.
need just the whole day just to process this. But we'll be right back, y'all. When we come back, we'll just finish listening to Lily and learning her lived experience. We'll return shortly. Do you want to answer your mom real quick? Because she,
Um,
you
no,
can.
she's literally, I'm just gonna text her real quick. She's literally just trying to send me pictures of a vehicle she's trying to buy me. But I'm
Yeah,
gonna
take your
just,
time.
I'm just gonna switch over here and text her real quick. Hmm,
We can pause it there. Okay, cool.
okay. She's fine now. Yeah, she's buying me a car and she's been like she keeps trying to, oh my God. She keeps sending me pictures like minivans. And I'm like, woman, I will never, ever in my life drive a minivan.
Why? But they're cheap and that you could. They're big.
I don't want a minivan. I'm not ready for that part of my life to start.
They're cheap and they're big.
I know, but oh man, I don't know. Yeah. If I can't find something else, I
And
will.
who bothers you in a minivan?
True. Like I saw a really
With all
nice
the shit you've been
Tahoe.
through lately,
Yeah, I need the
who's
most.
gonna bother you in a minivan? Ain't
That's what I'm
nobody gonna
saying.
bother you in a minivan.
That's kind of what she was saying. I showed her this really nice Tahoe that was in my price range. And she's like, you really want to roll around in a black Tahoe with these wheels and stuff? And I was like, yo, yes. She's like,
Yeah.
or you'll look
Or you
like a
can get
drug
arrested.
dealer.
Yep. Way to get arrested. Okay.
But it's
Just
such a
go
nice car.
take the minivan.
Yeah, I
Be
might.
incognito.
I was hoping to get like a vehicle, like a car that was a little more compact because I had to drive to Children's Hospital a lot. And minivans are okay on gas, but like a car would be better, like a Toyota Camry or something. I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
Something.
So let's go back in. I'm gonna just do the countdown in 3, 2, 1. Hey, Light Shiners, welcome back to the episode with Lily. I just want to, before we get into the rest of her story, I just really want to emphasize why it's important for you all to support this show with your likes, with your follows, with your ratings and reviews on Apple iTunes and subscribing to us on Spotify. It's really important for us to share the lived experience of foster youth. I believe that I haven't found another podcast that only highlights former foster youth and adoptee voices. Everyone else kind of like listens to everyone else, but this show specifically highlights former foster youth and adoptee voices. And it's a place for us to share our story, for us to educate, for us to heal. You know, I think a lot of the times people listen to the podcast and they're just like, well, it's just you, y'all just y'all are just telling trauma. No, people are healing. And a lot of people don't actually know. One of the questions before you can even come on the show is, are you in therapy and have you healed? Because I don't want people like trauma throw upping, trauma
Right.
vomiting on listeners. But the thing is, even like my book, a lot of people are like, your book is just trauma vomit. I'm like, but it's not. That's me being healed and me addressing it. Once you are to the point where you can confront what harmed you the most, that's like the last step of healing, is confronting what helped or what confronting what hurt you the most, and that will be the most helpful thing. So that's why we have this platform, is we are all healed and we are healed enough to confront it. So I want to remind you all that we need your support. So please click on the links in all of my social media, and donate if you can to the show. Uh, Subscribe to the Patreon any way that you can, or just share it with family and friends. That's free. If we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I know not everyone has the funds to support that way, but sharing is free and it's caring, and it's one way that you can show that you support former foster youth and adoptees. So with that all being said, we have Lily. Lily has just been, it's been an emotional roller. My story was an emotional roller coaster. Yours is like an emotional rocket to space.
Oh my
Like,
God.
because I don't feel like I'm coming back. I feel like it's a one-way trip to Mars.
Oh my God.
Where we ended was you were in the car with your foster mother and you went to your safe space. Tell us more about that.
So they take me to the children and youth headquarters and they sat me down at a table of people that should have been my advocates, like the guardian ad litem, a CASA wraparound team, um, the head of children and youth services, my caseworker supervisor. And I think what strikes me at that time, sitting at that table, I already knew, or at least no, I knew I wasn't going to be heard or believed. So I was continuing to disassociate. I was just staring at the clock in the room and I could hear them talking, but I couldn't really feel whatever they were talking about. I didn't really feel like I was all there, but not once during all the conversation did anybody ask me if I was okay. Nobody asked me to reiterate the story. Nobody asked me if I needed medical care.
That's a damn
Basically, the
shame.
conversation was she's a liar. She's a problem. Where do we put her? We've run through so many foster homes with her already. Okay, well, now we're going to put her in a group home.
And what number were we at? What number are we at by this point?
Um, so I sped past a couple of the irrelevant ones in between. At this point, I'm at
Ooh, I love that you
number.
said that because you know when there was a review on my Amazon and they're like he says he was in 30 plus homes but his book only highlights 9. I was like, well, yeah, the 9 that were relevant. Like
Right,
there were some that I
right.
was in for like a day or two, some I were in for like a couple weeks or a couple months, but they were just homes. They were just homes. But the ones that stuck out to me were the ones I wrote about, you know?
Yeah, yeah. At this point, I think I'm around foster home 17. Before I
Ooh,
haven't hit 20 yet, but some of the foster homes, the reason real quick before I go forward, some of them are irrelevant because they would put me in a foster home that only wanted babies. They'd keep me, and then a baby would come along, and then I'd be booted. Or they only wanted males in their home. They'd take me temporarily, and when a male would come along, then I'd be
for
booted.
me,
Or they
a lot of people forget that I was gay when I was in foster care. So I got kicked out just because I was gay. Like
absolutely.
it was fine. Like they were fine. I was fine. We were cool. And they found me twerking one day. They're like, "Do you believe in Jesus?" I was like, "No, I'm a faggot."
I believe in this booty. I don't know. Yeah.
And there are several. I think like 10 were just because of religious beliefs. Like I knew who I was and they knew who they were, and it just wasn't gonna work out.
Yeah. Oh, the religious ones were really fun when you're defiant, I guess that's what they call it now. But so one of the things that strikes me about right before they put me in the group home that I would only later find out is they never even told the judge about my abuse. The reason listed for my removal was ungovernable behavior. Um, and I felt in that moment like I was being punished and that I would never be heard or believed ever for anything. If I couldn't tell you something this big, how could I tell you something so small? If I'm being coming to you and asking for help for something that is serious, that means I can't ask you for anything. And this is really where my mental health disorders started to develop. My complete distrust of other people, my worry that they were manipulating me or they weren't listening to me or that I would be unheard. And I developed certain behaviors to try to make myself be heard before that abuse. It's not that I wasn't fighting back, I was just kind of in shock still. Everything had moved so quick from being removed to that point. When that happened, once it really settled in, I was very angry. When they put me in that group home, I'm kind of thankful because that group home was the first place to acknowledge my abuse. They scaled me in a couple different scorings, including for essay, and they said I scored very high for that as well as other things. And they were the first to put it on paper that my trauma was purely from foster care. Um, that group home I was in for like a year, maybe a little more, year and a half. And I mean, it was group home life. You know, there was a ton of girls and they hire whoever for staff. So some of the staff are cool, some of them are immature, some of them are downright mean to be mean. You have chores, you have to help cook, even though I'm a terrible cook still. I'm a terrible cook. But it was in my mind better than being in a foster home. There didn't have to be a direct interaction with one person or one set of people. I didn't feel as trapped. I at least knew I'd have clothing. There was a little bit more individuality that was allowed than in a foster home, as much
You
as there
think that
could
was a
be.
you think that was a better position for you? Because you know, a lot of times I feel like I was in this place called Child Haven and I was better there than in a specific foster home. What do you think?
I I absolutely think that that group home was better than almost all of my
And this
foster
is why
homes.
I also say that a lot of people think I'm fucking crazy when I say this, that group home and orphanages are better than foster homes. And people are like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, they're more regulated. You are more afraid to lose your job, quote unquote, if you have to go to a place and do like a 9 to 5 or a 5 to 9, or like if you're doing shift work, instead of you being like, I'm the parent. I think it also helps the fact that we know that these are workers and they know that they're workers, but I think it adds more trauma when we add like this foster parent. It adds a level of relationships that we do not need. We could just have
Right.
orphanage workers who are orphanage workers who aren't trying to act like parents, demanding us call them parents, trying to dictate how we eat, sleep, put on their family traditions onto us. I think the idea of foster parenting is actually sometimes more harmful, because the child has to go through so much more to assimilate with his family than just being in an institution. And I know people hate when people are like, well, we just institutionalize every child. No, it's not a monolith, but some children do better in a institutionalized setting, especially if they have siblings. So like me and my 4 siblings, I believe that we should have been kept in a orphanage or group home type setting until either we were all 4 adopted or all 4 put into the same home, or we all aged out. We needed to be
Absolutely.
together. And I think that's what group homes provide.
So a little back history that I've learned from another TikToker is they kind of do something like that in the UK. In the UK, when you're a certain age, I think it's like 12, which, you know, they should have more options. But at age 12, you can choose independent care, which is like a group home, but you have your own room. But it is staffed and it's not a foster home. It is a group home. The way they run their foster care in the UK is a little bit better. Every country has its problem, and foster care overall is a failed system. But the independent group home part of their system is very successful. In that group home, I began writing poetry. I found a way to be heard when I could not be heard in another way. And there were staff that I could get up in the middle of the night and I could read them this poetry and they could understand me. And I knew which staff was interested or not. You get to know them. And I could find validation where I needed to because I had options of different people who had different things to offer me, as far as how they responded or therapy or whatnot.
Hmm.
So after this, so one of the girls got into a restraint and I got pushed down the stairs on accident, complete accident. My ankle broke and the staff were not going to call the nurse.
Once again, you
And
just keep slipping over things like,
oh
yeah,
my God,
I was just at a place my ankle broke. Wait, what?
it was it was an accident. So like I thought like, oh, it's okay, until I tried to stand up on it and like I used jelly. I fell to the ground. It was not okay, but they called the nurse. The nurse that came, um she was she is the reason that I'm able to be okay. She's when I look back and I say, what could I take one good thing away? It would be her. So this nurse came in like screaming at the staff, why didn't you just take her to the hospital? Obviously, her ankle's broken. What are you doing? This is a child. Like, she looked me in my face and immediately, I don't know what it was. I don't know what you call that, but she quit her job and applied to be my foster parent. Now, she already was a foster parent, but she had to wait a period of time before she would be allowed to foster me. She is the one who first suggested transition. So I didn't just go to her foster home. We had visits, we'd have day visits. Slowly, I'd have an overnight visit. Maybe then I got to a weekend visit. It moved at a pace where I, at any point, could say I wasn't comfortable or this wasn't a good fit. She was very much adamant about talking about that. So
I
the
think
day that,
we talked about if in Ellery's episode, she had a similar transition, but if she was transitioning to being adopted by an older couple, not in foster care. But it was a similar transition, like how it just took like dating. It was like a date. It was like time. It
yeah.
took time.
And I mean, I thought they were great. And she always brought like my two foster brothers with me. And one was young. Well, they were both younger. Okay, but my one foster brother that was younger than me, it was like 6 foot something. So I always call him my younger, bigger brother. But um this is relevant because when they finally took me in to go to their house to live, they stopped at Walmart and told me to pick out paint. And I was like, for what? And they're like, you can paint your room. And I stared at a wall of paint and I had never in that whole time thought what was my favorite color. I didn't know
Wow,
what to
that's
pick.
crazy.
I I didn't feel like a person all the way up until this point. I felt like I was just this thing that just was moving about in the world. And when they took me home, they were not pushy. There was not like, oh, they didn't even explain a bunch of rules to me or anything. Like I was allowed to eat. She caught me. That see that language. She woke up to me eating one night in the evening at night, and she had to have this talk with me where she was like, you can eat whenever you want. You don't have to. I found food in your room, and that's okay, but
Yep.
you don't have to hide it. You could wake up in the middle of the night and come sit at this table and eat if you want. If you can't sleep, you can come get me. She started taking me on these walks, and I'd start talking, and when I showed her my poetry, she believed in me more than anything. This was a really good placement. My foster brother was showed me heavy metal music and like stuff that I never knew about, and I got just as much. This was my first Christmas. I got something. My first Easter I ever got anything. My first birthday that was ever celebrated since I was 9. At this point, I'm almost 16, and uh, I chose to leave. There was a day that they had a new foster girl there, and she had stolen money from out of someone's like pants through the washer and dryer. Um, and the foster father blamed me because she was um, mentally challenged, and he was very much attached to her. He wasn't not like it's not that he didn't like me, but he did have more of an attachment with her. So he just didn't believe that she would do that, and my foster mother wasn't home yet, and in that moment was like a trauma flood when he told me that he didn't believe me. It took me right back to that space. And I was like, no, F this. I'm leaving. You don't believe me. I've done nothing to you for you to believe this. And mind you, this is a really good home. If I would have waited till my foster mom got home, this is something that could have been worked out. But due to my trauma, because of foster care, I would say, robbed of having kept this family because of how much trauma. I called my caseworker. I was like, remove me right now. She was hesitant, but she came and picked me up before my foster mother ever got home. At this point, I thought, I'm going to hurt myself before someone else hurts me. I'm
Yep.
going to remove myself before someone gets rid of me. So that was my only good foster home, and they really loved me, and I was there for 9 months. That is the longest I have ever been in a foster home in my experience. And after that was just a bunch of psych wards, group homes. I ended up with these foster parents that were actually a part of the Salvation Army religion. So I thought the Salvation Army was like,
What?
I I thought no, I thought it was a store.
I thought it was a store too.
It is not just a store, it's a religion. It's a whole church.
What's
It's
the
a
church?
whole
Is it
it's a
Christian church?
no, they are a cult
Are they
church. I
actually
don't
an army?
kind of they're very weird. It's not Christian, it's not Catholic, I don't know what you call it. That when they get married they absolutely have to wear uniforms. um these people like, oh my gosh, it was such an awkward and traumatic experience. I wasn't allowed to do anything because it was against Jesus. I got whipped with a belt and told that I needed to admit that I was born of sin because I was born out of wedlock. And um
Wow. And this is
I
after all
couldn't.
the trauma that you've already like experienced. Like how much more
Yes.
trauma are they going to put you through?
Oh my gosh. I asked to be removed from that foster home. That was my last foster home. And the ones in between, some of them were just rude. There was a lot of random things in between, but they aren't like you were talking about. They're not the most relevant. Most foster parents either just didn't care and weren't abusive, but just didn't give a crap about me at all. I was just existing for their money, or they were verbally abusive, but really at that point I was like, oh well, that's not too abusive, and I should have never had to thought that. Well, I mean, this isn't that bad. Like, um, but it was all bad. But the last foster home with those weird. Oh, it was so weird. Like I wanted to watch Twilight at the time, and they were like, "That's demonic." I couldn't go into Hot Topics to pick out clothes because they're like, that is Satan's store. And I was like, what is going on? What is life?
Right? What is life?
What I just want to watch this obviously fake show about hot vampires. What is happening? Um, I ended up having a boyfriend that I almost never got to see, and they would like review my Yahoo chats to make sure it was appropriate and like whatnot. And uh when I went to age out, so when I went to age out, they knew I was about to age out and they kicked me out. Um I had to go live with someone at a church because I was going to go to college. Um Again, I had been in those 3 group homes, all these foster homes. I had no idea of my own identity. I felt like from the moment they put me in that car and took me from my family, from that point forward, I no longer had anything to identify myself with or as. I had no ability to decide like what style of clothing I liked. I had no ability to decide what kind of things I liked because I was always in fight or flight. I was always in, this isn't my home, this is just a bed. This isn't, this will only last so long. I would
Mm-hmm.
talk myself through these things to tell myself that I didn't need to care about any of these people because it was just me passing through.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I knew it was traumatic. I did, but I carried that weight for a long time. And I know I've explained it like this before, but this is the best way I would like to explain how all of that related to me. So it felt like I took a heavy rock and I put it in my pocket. Every time somebody would abuse me, I just put it in my pocket. I just stuck it there because I couldn't look at it. There was nothing I could do about it. And my body was telling me, no, just set it down. So I put it in my pocket. And honestly, 2 years ago was really when I accidentally drove past the foster home where those boys were essayed. And by fate, that is where I really began my healing and
Mm-hmm.
also my strongest advocacy. I drove by it. I didn't even expect to drive by it. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't even know I was in the same county. I was just driving around,
And
like
you
just
and
having a
you
trip.
went on it. I had a similar experience where I went back to the homes that abused me the most. And like you said, that rock in your pocket, I gave it back to them. Like I literally knocked on their door and I was like, hey, you remember me? They're like, Carlos? I was like, yeah, so you abused me. You remember that? Yeah, fuck you. And you can have this, you can have it back. And I literally just gave it back to multiple of them. Like, you can have it back. And it's the same type of it's similar things where like you give it back. You just say, I'm no longer going to carry it anymore. I acknowledge that it was there and that it was a part of me, but you can have it back now.
Yeah. And it was like it was the grieving happened first, and that I never expected. I didn't realize how this grieving process would work when I took that weight out of my pocket as an adult and as a mother now, and I really looked at it, and I really looked at myself as a child as a separate person from myself, and I looked at what had happened to me. There was at least 2 weeks where my chest caved in. I couldn't comprehend how anybody could treat anyone in the ways that I was treated. For once, it felt like true trauma because remember, I was in fight or flight that whole time, survival mode, go through, go through, go through. I didn't get to
Mm-hmm.
feel it all. I started
Yep.
getting upset. I was hurt. I was grieving for myself. I was grieving for the person I used to be. I was grieving for the little girl that I was when it happened. Um, and that's when I started and opened my case legally against my foster brother and my foster family. I attempted to file a lawsuit against my caseworker, but my state is very resistant. I called from one end to the other. There was not a single lawyer that would take my case against the caseworker. Um, at that point, I realized that the foster grandfather had been arrested for um, deviant essay with minor children, not only in his foster home, but at that high school. And that's when I was like, oh my God. I remember him driving us in the middle of the night to the high school, and he was telling us he was going in to do extra work with some students, and he would have us sit in the car when he'd go in, and he was actually essaying children in the school after
Unbelievable.
hours. So
Unbelievable.
he's in prison now. And so when I told the police about all this and I could explain to them the house and I'm like giving them details, they cannot deny that this is happening. Actually, almost nothing came out of it. The police were actually pretty upset that I was bringing this forward. I wanted my files, and I immediately after after that 2 weeks of grieving, I'm like, I need my files. I need to see what this says. They tried to refuse me my files. I held a protest at the courthouse, and I called the county solicitor out by name on a megaphone. I sat there all day. I had gone to the
Yep.
commissioner's office and I let them know I was doing this and why. I had contacted the prothonotari's office. Originally, the prothonotari's office told me I could view my files at the courthouse but could not take them. I tried to tell them that's illegal. It's public record. I can pay for them and take them. And they were illegally trying to prevent me from getting copies of that. So I got a hold of the Pennsylvania Coalition Against I don't want to say certain words on here in case it's triggering, SA, and they contacted a free lawyer that was to be my lawyer. They got my files for me. Children and Youth originally tried to tell me there was a flood, and I'm like, bro, this is on top of a mountain in the Allegheny National Forest. It flooded when? Where? The water runs downhill. Like literally, there was never a flood. There's no documentation of ever. They were trying to claim not like, oh, the building flooded, because they couldn't claim that. The building was in its condition. Um, it's funny that they tried to say that, but then gave it back to me. It's funny that the police told me that they didn't want to get the warrant for the files because they were worried about Watergate issues. And I was like, what the heck does that mean? And I had to look it up, and they're like, oh, they will destroy the files. If we push too hard, you won't get those files. They'll destroy them. This is what the police told me. The police are telling me essentially, like, we know it's wrong, but we're not going to do anything because the DA once we take this up further, they're not going to want to do anything about this. In that moment, I had to make a choice. I could sit in my misery after I'd gotten all this paperwork, or I could do something to try to make it different for somebody else. And that is when I created my charity. My charity was an idea. I went on Facebook and started asking for donations and explained to them this idea that I wanted to do these care packages and stuff for foster youth. I created a website. I just started rolling down this hill. And the further I got on this journey of advocacy and helping other youth, hearing other stories and advocating for mine and talking, the easier it was to breathe. The easier it was to take my power back, the easier it was that I didn't need to grieve anymore because I wasn't going to give them another tear from my
Mhm.
body. They weren't going to have that energy from me anymore. The only energy you're going to have from me now is that I'm going to advocate to make changes to this system. And as you know, I cover a lot of grim topics. I know that a lot of people like to use the not all this, not all that. Um, Not all, but a majority of foster homes and foster parents and foster care experiences are horrific. They are things that you have to try to wrap your mind around that happened to another human. So
Yep.
that's when I started digging into how many foster kids are missing, how many are murdered. And that's kind of my story. Now, once I aged out, I immediately looked for my biological family. Um, this whole time I was in foster care, they denied me all contact to my siblings, my grandmother, my mother. I had talked to nobody. I mean, they tried to strip me of my identity, where I came from, all of that. So when I got out, I'd immediately found my grandmother, and I think one of the first few words was, she said, "I knew you'd make your way back home."
Oh, that's amazing.
She was so scared because she didn't know where I was. They wouldn't tell her what foster home I was in. She had no idea. All of those years of her not knowing, was I alive? Was I missing? Where is she? What's happening? Um, my mother also immediately stepped back into my life. She was in a better place. She was healthy. Everything was fine. She moved back from Florida because I got pregnant with my son not long after. um, 70% of all females that leave foster care get pregnant within the first 2 years. And that is because they're looking for something they didn't all that time. They're looking for connection. They're looking for love. They're looking for someone to save them or help them. I fell into that category. And but when I became pregnant, it was amazing to me that my family even now is the only person that has ever come forward for me. Not that my one good foster home hasn't. I have some reserves. I'd like to go visit them, and I'd like to share that journey with you when I do. I think it's kind of like embarrassment that I hurt myself and I hurt them, even though they were good, that has kept me from going there. But all my other foster parents, when I left, nobody asked anything that, like, at all.
Like no
If
one
I'm
cared.
Nobody did. They kicked me out. I went to college. Nobody explained to me anything. They didn't explain boundaries. They didn't explain good relationships. I know we had talked about re-traumatization, and it's not something I talk a lot about on social media because it is widely judged. But 3 days into me being into college, I was I was also essayed by another person. But this was not molestation. This was I don't know if I'm allowed to say those words, but
Yeah, you are. It's
I was
your
raped.
personal.
I was raped. I stupidly like went with some boy. We were doing the campus tour and he wanted to hang out, and he wrote LF on his like whiteboard outside his room and turned this music up, and everything happened. And I mean, I disassociated so hard. And um even though I had been molested before, I had never been raped. And yeah, I wasn't going to go to the police. I mean, I walked out of there and I called my friend, and she was like, don't touch anything with your hands, because unfortunately it was something she had experienced. She knew what was going to happen. um the experience with the police in the hospital was almost bad, if not worse, than the actual experience of being assaulted, because of how in
Intrusive they are to get the information.
I mean, they were taking pictures of my naked body with bite marks and bruises, because this rape was not. And he even on paperwork, I have paperwork that says, he's like, well, she said no, but I didn't think she meant it. And he ended up only getting ARD, which in my state means that he was on probation, and it was on his record for a period of time, and then it would be expunged. So it's an ARD program. I didn't know anything. They didn't give me. I never talked to the public defender through it all. He came from a nice, middle class white family, and I'm just foster care scum. So nobody really believed me, or they still prosecuted it, but not to the degree. Like, if you have on paper a person saying that they heard you say no, I
Yeah.
feel like there should have been more. But re-victimized, definitely. I was very lost. I was very lost for a very long time, trying to figure out who I was. And because foster care never prepared me, it never prepared me financially. It never prepared me to understand money, the use of money. I mean, I would get these refunds back from college, and because I had nothing, I'd never had anything. I blew all of it on like stuff I didn't even like, crazy, like stuff I definitely didn't need.
The
It was
need.
lavish. I was just
No
spending.
financial, no financial literacy at all.
None
None
at all.
whatsoever.
Didn't even know how to open a bank.
So where you are now? Where are you now?
So now I'm building my credit. I use a credit union to do that. I've been learning more about credit as I go along. I'm running my charity. I'm getting ready to move it over to nonprofit. I do a mentorship program, which is one of my favorite programs. I get to work directly. I do court support if they run into legal issues, because I mean, I was on juvenile probation in between all that, just so you know. In between all that, I got in trouble for some things, and I go to court for juveniles. If they need someone that's actually going to stand next to them and believe in them, that's going to be me.
I love
Now
that.
I love doing it. I'm a mother. I
Bitch, I'm a mother.
Yeah. I I parent differently than some people because of all that trauma, but I'm very peculiar, protective and gentle with my children. I let them be. I'm non-gender specific. I have literally opened the doors for them. Like, become who you are going to become, baby. Be a flower, be a tree, whatever you will be. Let's just nurture whatever it is that you are becoming.
I love
I
that.
think I love that. My kids are awesome. I mean, they sometimes they drive me a little nuts. They're very energetic, but I I am healed, but I'm still healing all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's bit by bit, it's day by day. when I come across a trigger or I feel invalidated, I had to remind myself that I'm not in that space and I can validate myself.
Self.
I've been in therapy extensively. Um, I think I'm in a way better spot. And I think the only thing that brought me really this far was advocating for other foster youth.
I love
The
that.
the moment that I started speaking for them and with them, because there are some youth that want their story told, but they want the anonymity of not, they're worried, they're scared. When I started doing that, and then I started getting these people that came to me like, I want to tell my story now. I'm ready now because you're out here literally calling this county out by name. You're naming the caseworkers, you're posting their pictures,
Yep.
you're posting where they work now. And yes, I want justice still from that caseworker. That was biased, that was conflict of interest, it was very unprofessional. But once these people started coming to me, I found purpose that I had never had before. So I feel like I'm in a good place. And seeing your videos, you know, I made that one video, but seeing your videos and realizing you were the first interaction straight out of my trauma. Like when I was starting to first heal, this was like right after I'd started the investigation and stuff. um I was like, holy shit, this happens to other people.
People.
I mean, I knew it happened to me and the kids I knew, but like there's more. And the
Yep.
more I watched your content, the more I was like, wow,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, you
exactly
really
why
did it.
that's exactly why I released that content and I released my book is because I felt alone for the longest time. And a lot of people just think that I started my content off foster care, but that wasn't. I started with YouTube and I started just doing cut.com and just like regular content creator shit with YouTube. But then there was a lot of times where I would say something on on the show and I would say like, "Oh, I was in foster care, so that's why." And then people would comment. I would see the comments like, "Oh, I was in foster care too," and like people would be sharing their stories. But it's a funny YouTube show. But then they're sharing their foster care stories. So I was just like, wow, there's a lot of people in here who struggled through that. So then when TikTok came around and we were also in a pandemic and there was literally nothing to do in 2020, I just picked up my phone. I was just like, so who was in foster care? Because I heard like there's a lot of y'all motherfuckers. It's like,
Yeah.
no, for real. And that's how it started. And then when you start to follow so many people and start to learn so many other people's stories, you're just like, I am not alone. So speaking of that, Lily, what is one thing that you would say to a current foster youth? What's one piece of advice that you would give them from your lived experience that you've learned and that you want to share?
The one thing I would say to a current or even former foster youth, you know, someone aging out even, um, is that your story isn't over and that it's your turn to write your story now. When foster care forms you like that, that doesn't have to be your whole book. That's always how I feel like I tell my youth, you know, it's your turn to write your story now. You have the ability. You are able to create something better now.
I love that. You're now the author. You now hold the pen to create whatever future that
Yes.
you want. I love that. Well, Lily, thank you so much for being on War to the State and thank you for
Thank you for
sharing
having
your
me.
experience. My pleasure. My pleasure. Please, please, please let the people know where they can follow you, where they can support you, where they can go and help out your charity.
Oh, absolutely. I'm on TikTok if you want to see some content or more personal. And my thing on there is at Lelee Clark. So it's Leelee Clark. I'm also on Facebook. You can look up Rising with Hope. There on that Facebook page will link you to my web page. There's Amazon wish lists. On there are Google Doc forms. If you know a youth, I serve youth 14 to 26. I believe up to 26 is a really good age to give support.
Ditto,
For
ditto. That's the age I support up to too. Ditto.
Yeah, and you can apply for there. Everything I do is obviously free. You can apply to get a foster care box, or you can refer someone if you know a youth, or a baby box. I do a Grow With Me program for youth that are pregnant or parenting, that are prior foster youth, or the mentorship, or if you want to be a mentor. All of that is linked on that page. I have not created a YouTube yet. I have been told to do so. I am getting there. So basically, I have my link tree as well on my TikTok, and everything else should be linked on that Facebook. And there's a lot of information. Just as we're ending, on my TikTok, you're going to find various things. So just be aware. I don't only talk about my lived experiences, but the experience and the truth of some of the darker sides of the system as a whole. So I speak on trafficking, missing children, murdered children. And I think that helps to paint the bigger picture, um, for the public to really realize that this needs reformed or abolished altogether.
Yep, I love that. I love it. That's kind of what I do with my platform too. Like 90%, I would say of my content's about me, but then if I hear a story or if I come if someone if a foster youth or someone a bio mom was like, "Hey, I need help trying to get my baby." I will always
And
lend my time and my platform for that. But thank you, Lee, for doing everything that you do. Thank you for being a voice for, I would say, the voiceless, but I hate when people say the voice for the voiceless. No,
yeah,
foster youth have voices. You just don't fucking listen. Okay.
right.
For thank you for being a voice for the unheard. I think you should. I think I
Yes.
should say, because I think we're at a position now that we're older and and you're going to hear me. You're
Yes.
you're going to hear me no matter if I have to sit out there with a megaphone in front of your job. You are going
Literally have a
to hear
megaphone.
me. But I want to thank you so much. And I want to remind you all to, no matter what's going on, no matter how low you might feel, no matter how dim you think your light is, keep shining it, because even in the midst of pitch darkness, a dim light still shines. So hey, I know that's a weird way for me to say that. I
I think
always
it's
usually say like
beautiful.
shine your light, always shine your light, but then sometimes you can't be bright as fuck. Sometimes you are having a hard time. Sometimes trials and tribulations are a little bit harder. But I want to remind people that you don't have to be bright and bubbly and smiley all the time to still advocate. And I think that's one thing I get from your platform. And maybe that's why I said that, is that you don't always have to be me or like, hi guys, let me educate you. You can just like, nah, people are fucking missing and I'm tired of this shit.
Yeah.
And and like and maybe your light is not as bright because you're just tired of it. But that light in the darkness, because you're talking about darkness. So you're literally going into darkness and you're still shining, and people will still find you. And I love, that's one thing I do love about you and your platform. So thank you so much for doing that. And guys, always shine your light, and make sure that you follow Lily on all of her platforms. Make sure that you're leaving us a 5-star rating review on Apple iPod or Apple Podcast, and subscribing to us on Spotify. And we will see y'all next week.
Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye. Oh, I gotta pee. I gotta pee. I gotta pee. Yay. Resource. I need to do the spotlight. Like, this is for you. This is literally for you to share your lived experience. Yeah, I have similar experiences. I can click on it.